Alright, how's everybody? It's lovely to see you all. Talking about TV, that is our favorite thing. It's been my favorite thing all my life. I want to thank everybody who came tonight to celebrate the opening of this exhibit. Thanks to Wendy for putting it all together. I know it's her job, but I also know that she does it better than anybody they could possibly have ever hired. I remember when she came for the interview, and I was like, there's no way they're not going to hire you. She's just the person to do this job, so I love that. And I'm really excited for everybody to see all these treasures that she has spent her career practicing and preserving and presenting to the public. I think archives are the coolest thing. It's one of the big growing jobs in the world, and I think it's fun to see someone who actually does it for a living. I've been in love with TV about as long as Wendy has been, since I was a kid in Cleveland in the 1970s, when I got to watch Gilligan's Island in color where available. Which is a phrase my son doesn't understand whatsoever, right? And then it was in stereo where available. But it was still watching people who became my friends when I was an only child. And so TV provided that to me, and I think it still provides that to a lot of people. We learned that some people, when they're new in this country, learn how to speak the language from watching television. And they hear actual colloquial dialogue, not the, good morning, how are you? ¿Dónde está la biblioteca? This is not going to get you very far in any other country. So TV provides a lot, and it also provided me the chance to hear stories from all over the world when I was a kid. And in the days before VCRs and DVD, I took a cassette recorder and set it in front of the speaker on the TV and recorded Bonanza so that I could have Michael Landon's dreamy voice. But also so that I could remember the story, so I'd go to school the next day. And I'd reiterate what it was to my friends standing on a chair in the cafeteria and explaining exactly, and I had no idea what a third act twist was or what 4-act structure was, which is what I teach now. I just knew that, like, at this one moment, they almost shot little Joe. It was very scary. We were very worried about that. But it all was good by the end, which is a lovely thing TV promises us. You can solve your problems in an hour or half an hour, which is a beautiful thing. So that was something I remembered very much. And I also started to write TV when I was little. And I wrote episodes of Bonanza, and I actually wrote an episode of The Lou Grant Show, and I gave Robert Walden's character a little sister who happened to be my age. And I sent the script to the CBS address in the back of the TV guy. And about, I don't know how many months later, I got actually a letter from CBS, which was a photograph of Robert Walden, his publicity photograph, and it was made out to the name of the sister I had invented, which means some secretary somewhere read the thing and knew some little girl would just go, oh, they read my script. That was fun. So, I've been looking at TV all my life. When I got married, my husband and I literally moved out to LA the day after we got married. Right? The wedding party had to come to our house that morning after having had a party the night before and load a Hertz Penske truck with all our stuff so that we could come out here so that I could write TV, which was the goal of my life. And I got the chance to do that after being an assistant for several years, which is kind of the process. But by doing that, I got to work with a lot of different interesting writers on a lot of different interesting shows. When I look at this exhibit, what strikes me is she's got a photo of Cagney and Lacey. Years after that, I worked on a show called Alienation, which filmed in that same warehouse. So we were always walking around with the ghost of Sharon Bless and Tyne Daly, and the idea that they had once been here, and that those writers who'd won Emmys had sat in these offices, and we were somehow soaking in that spirit. And that's what I saw. And the other thing I saw when I came out and actually got a job on a TV show was what Wendy was talking to me about as we sort of thought about tonight. Who knew? Like when I watched TV in Cleveland, there were only 3 brothers on Bonanza. And they had a dad, and they had a cook. And they had some guest stars. I didn't know they had 200 people behind the scenes, cameramen, and makeup people, and hairdressers, and boom mic operators, and sound supervisors, and transpo captains. I didn't know what a transpo captain was until I moved out here. And then I thought, what a shame for all those boys back in Cleveland who had career day, and if you liked cars, you were either going to sell them or build them. Who knew you could come out here and rent them by the week and then drive around in Ferraris to see if you liked them? It was amazing to me, and that was a job I learned about when I was working at the Stephen Cannell Company. Because all his shows, the car was the first thing you invented, right? Here's the car, here's the character who'll be in the car, here's the stories of what will happen to him. But it's all about the car. So, I was amazed at the fact that that was a job you could have and nobody knew about that. And then the other thing that I found fascinating when I moved out here was you started to realize how much this industry was the backyard for everyone who lived here. Your children walked around on the sets and hung around with their dad in their offices, right? I mean, when I was a kid, went to the Partridge Family, I was all for Danny Bonaducci because I knew all the other girls were lined up for David Cassidy and I didn't want to fight through that crowd, right? And then I found out later on, Danny Bonaducci's dad, Joseph Bonaducci, had written on the Dick Van Dyke Show. So here's the whole family history of one person was in the business and the whole family followed in. And then a couple years ago I wrote a book on the Monkees because Mickey Dolenz is my other favorite guy. And who knew until I studied him that his father had played the Count of Monte Cristo on television and his mother was an actress from movies in the 40s. So, you know, they were able to say, hey, there's this new TV show, needs a kid about 10 years old. Your kid's free, isn't he? Bam! And he was Circus Boy for 3 years on television in the late 50s. So all this family connection. And then when I think about the locations, when we first moved to the Valley, which is kind of the bedroom community for anyone who works behind the scenes in television, we went to the Toluca Lake Bob's Big Boy. And somebody there told us, Ron Howard used to hang out here when he was a teenager. And I was like, when I was in Cleveland, I hung out at the Bob's Big Boy, and I ate those tasty tea cakes. I have something in common with Ron Howard. And weirdly enough, go forward 30 years, my son in high school went to that Toluca Lake Bob's Big Boy after prom. I was like, no, that's too weird for me. And he has no idea and he could care less. But it meant something to me that I saw the continuation of this history going on. So I think that's really, really interesting. And so I love the fact that Wendy chose to focus on the people behind the scenes. Because that's who the rest of America doesn't really find out about. And those are the people that make the magic happen. Right? Actors are wonderful, and of course you can do theater all by yourself, one person in a room. But this is the magic that goes around the world. I mean, and I learned about that when my Sicilian cousins came to visit us on their honeymoon. And we're sitting in the backyard speaking very broken Italian, and they were doing some very broken English, and somehow it all came together. The minute we figured out, we both knew the theme song for Bewitched. And we could talk about episodes of that show and understand it through our very low-level bit of each other's language. So the fact that TV wasn't just LA's backyard, but is really the backyard for the whole world. We come together and recognize each other from these memories we have of our childhood. And that's what these people provided us, and of course continue to provide us in all the many shows that we're still watching today. So I was really interested in the photos that she chose and the things that I remember learning from them, right? I mean, and now that I teach screenwriting and history of screenwriting and I teach television writing, I've read a lot of scholarly material, some of which makes you go, really? Like, could you think of something better? But, you know, when you find a picture of I Love Lucy, it's really interesting that what the news people would photograph would be her on the set as an actress, but we know through research that she produced her stuff. That she was picking scripts at Desilu and making choices. She was a studio executive. And that's such an interesting thing. That puts her in the world of a feminist, whereas the acting and the character of Lucy has been debated in books. Was she a feminist, or did she sort of put the feminist movement back a few years with some of the stuff she did, right? So the idea that people are debating these things in classrooms all over the world, all over the country, really, really interests me. You know, there's Buffy studies. Not that there's a Buffy picture, but there's Buffy studies in colleges. Imagine that, right? I work with a woman who studies Harry Potter and does a class in Harry Potter, which, you know, always fills up every year. So the I Love Lucy picture really impressed me. The Brian song photograph right here. I remember friends telling me how great that movie was, but I hadn't watched it because I have zero interest in football. And they're like, it has nothing to do with football. But I didn't know that. And in the world without streaming and DVRs, I couldn't watch it again because it had finished. So I had to wait until it was rerun at the 11:30 p.m. movie later that year and stay up, and at 1 in the morning, baseball, it's the most beautiful male friendship I had ever seen. And you don't really see a lot of buddy movies, but a real friendship of men who brought themselves through tough times. That's what TV does best. It introduces us to people who are having real relationships and conversations and sharing with each other in ways that, you know, we say now that when you're teaching writing or art or any of those things, you're teaching empathy. You're teaching people to understand each other, which Lord knows we need a whole lot of. So the fact that you can see that here's Billy D. Williams pre-Star Wars, pre-Lando Calrissian, which is really when I fell in love with him, meeting with Gale Sayers, and that you're watching your story be told to the world through this medium that brought it into people's houses. Houses that might not have wanted to know a story that was about an interracial friendship, right? But if you stumbled on, and there were only 4 channels back then, and a couple of little PBS things, you were stuck watching, and you suddenly learned something that you needed to learn, but you didn't know you needed to learn it. So the Brian Son picture really catches me. So does the Barney Miller, although it doesn't have a picture of Abe Vigoda in it. And Abe Vigoda was, you know, Barney Miller to me. But he also taught me that you could start your career doing one thing, because in my family he was Tessio from The Godfather, and then he was Fish for all those years, and I was like, oh, he's had a pretty good career moving from character to character, right? Or this Addams Family picture really makes me laugh. Where's that? They're right behind me. Because you get Jackie Coogan, who when I watched The Addams Family, I didn't know that he was the kid from The Kid, that Charlie Chaplin had given him work when he was a kid, and that this is where he was as a grown-up, and he was still working. The idea that your career could last that long because you were a good person and people kept hiring you. You know, my favorite story to tell people so they don't get arrogant about stuff is when Michael J. Fox first won his first Emmy for being on Family Ties. He came downstairs for breakfast the next morning, and he noticed on his breakfast table, he had like brothers and sisters, right? His mother had placed the Emmy and swim trophies and Little League trophies. Any trophy any kid in that family had won were all on the breakfast table. And he must have like stumbled in the room all happy with himself and looked at the table and had a look on his face like, what? And his mother looked up and said, you just remember you're not the only one in this family who wins things. And I thought, that's why the man is so balanced, because he had really good parents. And that's why he turned out to be such a nice guy. So thinking about the long career of somebody like Jackie Coogan, I think is really cool. A friend of mine told me a great story about John Schneider from Dukes of Hazzard. Right? The fact that, you know, when he was young and on the show, he kind of blew through some cash pretty quick, which is never a good idea. So that when he ends up being the dad on Smallville, he kindly spoke to the younger people in the cast and let them know they should save their money. You don't know how long you'll need it to last between shows. And just the idea that he wanted to give them the wisdom he'd learned from his experience, I thought was gorgeous. So I think these pictures really represent what the people who live in Los Angeles provide to the whole world. And I think it's really super wonderful that we all got to be here to share them. And I want to thank Wendy for inviting me and for putting it together. And I hope everybody will have a chance to enjoy them, both the giant collection in the book and the stuff you can see online. And I want to thank TV in general, because through TV, I got my career. I met my friend Ken, who's over there, working on a TV show, and he invited me to work in this marvelous MFA program, which we have some students here tonight, so it's always lovely, because I get to meet all of them through him. And then I got to meet Wendy, because we happen to love TV, and she was at my local library, and somehow we got into a conversation that has never stopped.
Yes.
So TV creates friendships all around the world, and I think that's a beautiful thing to celebrate. Thanks for coming.